And I always want to do like a big intro thing, but I just don't have one. I stream with some guys, and he's got like a little song and a little graphic. It's very professional. And I'm sorry, you're stuck with me. Good evening,
Oh, great.
everybody. Thank you so much for joining me to cap off this foster care fundraising month. I know it's a little different than what I normally do, and I'm so happy that a lot of you participated and you've said really nice things and helped the video spread far. And we've really smashed the fundraising goal this year. Last year, I didn't know what to expect, so I was like, I don't know, a couple $100. Google just makes me list a number, and we raised $270, I think. And this year we have more than 10x that. We're over 2,700. So that's really exciting, and that doesn't even count the ad money that from the other videos. I'll tally that at the end of the month, and I'll bundle that in. So I think we're going to get really close to I believe we'll get over $3,000. So that's very exciting. With me this evening, I've got Afton Spriggs, who works at Safe Families for Children. That's what the fundraiser is, and I didn't know that she worked there. So I know Afton personally, and we used to go to church together. And I was doing this fundraiser, and I did Safe Families last year. And my wife Liv was like, "Why don't you, like, if you're gonna do a stream, why don't you call Afton?" And I'm like, "Well, like, I know Afton fosters, but like, okay, that's cool. Like, we go." She's like, "No, she works there." And I'm like, "Really? She does?"
Yeah.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Safe Families?
Yeah.
I've mentioned a little bit in the videos that like it's kind of a preventative measure for foster care, but I mean, you're the expert, so take it away.
Yeah, thanks. It was really great when Liv messaged me. It was like worlds colliding, which is so exciting. But yeah, I recently started working for Safe Families for Children just back in March. So, I got the opportunity to do a career change. And so I knew that I really wanted to do something in an area that I was, really passionate about. And so Safe Families was just kind of a no-brainer for me because, I had a lot of friends who were Safe Families volunteers. So I was familiar with the organization already. And I think what I love about it is what you already mentioned, Greg, which is the prevention aspect of it.
Yeah.
So like as foster parents, you and I can both attest to the fact that you're dealing with a lot of brokenness and dysfunction in the child welfare system. So really what Safe Families is all about is what if you could prevent kids from unnecessarily entering that broken system in the first place, which is what I really love and what led me to where I am now.
Yeah. So you said you're working with their like outreach department. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a community engagement coordinator. So I go around and talk to different groups about what Safe Families does. And, really I can break it down in a pretty easy and kind of tangible way that'll make sense for everybody. It really just boils down to these three main goals, which is child abuse prevention. So we provide overwhelmed and resource limited parents with a safe and temporary place that they can take their child without the threat of losing custody. So they maintain their parental rights with Safe Families. And then by offering that support to a family in crisis, our goal is to prevent potential abuse and neglect before it can happen. And the second one is, as I mentioned, child welfare deflection. So we provide a safe alternative for families in crisis outside of child welfare services, which then significantly reduces the number of kids going into that system, which we know is already overworked, overwhelmed, at capacity. Yeah, and then family support and stabilization. So we know that many of the parents and families in crisis that we serve are struggling because of limited social support or the lack of an extended family. So our volunteers really work to become like that extended family, like that support system for a family that's in crisis. So really all comes down to keeping children safe, keeping families together, and then connecting families to resources and extended family-like support systems. So, a little bit about what that might look like in action. Like it sounds good on paper, right? But what it might actually look like in action is you've got a family facing a crisis. So let's say homelessness, a medical emergency, maybe they lose their job, or it could be something more serious like drug addiction or even a short-term jail sentence. Yeah. So these families can either reach out to us on their own through a referral phone number, or they might get referred to us by a school, a hospital, or maybe a social worker. So from that point, Safe Families, we come in and we deploy this team of volunteers that really comes around them as this kind of wraparound circle of support for this family in crisis. So a host family will take kids into their home, again, give them that safe temporary place to stay while their parent gets back on their feet. And then we also pair them up with a family friend. So this is somebody who really truly just offers friendship to a family in crisis. So they might invite them over for dinner or help with babysitting, help with transportation, getting them to and from doctor's appointments, job interviews, things like that. It's really just someone that they can call like a friend when they need some support. And then we also help them by assigning a family coach who meets with them to talk about their goals, what they need to do to get back on their feet, and how they can help them reach that goal. So that could be help with looking for a job, help with finding housing, counseling services, things like that. And then we have a team of people that we just call resource friends. And so they are the ones who are helping with tangible items for families. So think diapers, formula,
Yeah.
clothes, things like that. And the thing that's really exciting about this is our whole goal, much like foster care, is reunification, but we actually have a 93% success rate for reunification. So 93% of the kids and families that we serve end up going back to their parents or with a relative. So our families don't receive anything to serve. They aren't paid a stipend. They really just do it out of a desire to help other people.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's such a amazing success rate. And I know our church, I think, does. I think they kind of rally for safe families. And so we've got some
Yeah.
friends that do it. And what draws me to it is a couple of things. One, like you said, the foster care system is messed up. So if we can keep people out of it, great, so much better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people, kind of forget that there's like a middle ground, like you're talking about, like not everybody is either happy or so broken their kids need to be taken away. Like there's
Yes.
a struggling middle area. So we've got some friends that do, like you're talking about, they watch kids. I think
Mm-hmm.
like 1 or 2 weekends a month, sometimes like a full week. So like it's
Mm-hmm.
longer than just a couple hours. It's like several days in a row. And it's
Yeah.
basically just a really long stay over. So mom and dad can get their head above water, or maybe they need to do a bunch of work. Like they really need to get some hours in or something,
Yep.
and, get paid,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. So yeah, it's more than just, maybe staying in a friend's house for a day. It's like a longer term kind of filling
Yeah.
that gap. And I think that's really cool. And I think
Yeah.
what I think is neat is I get, anytime I talk about foster care, and I'm sure you get the same thing, people are like, oh, I could never do that. Oh, I can't. It's
Right.
so much, such a big commitment, all this kind of stuff. Right. And
Right.
that's
Right.
why I always bring up safe families, because it's like foster care light. It's like foster parenting light.
Yes.
You can get
Yes.
involved. You don't need to commit, 2, 3, 4 years, like 100% 24/7. You can just do a week. You can do a weekend. You can bring supplies. You can just hang out with,
Yes.
whatever it is. Like it's that middle ground that I love so much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of our hostings, like you said, can be a weekend or a week or so. I mean, sometimes ours do go here locally a little bit longer because of the housing crisis in our area. So
Yeah.
6 to 8 weeks is about our average hosting. Yeah, it definitely is a good opportunity to get involved without being kind of stuck in the legal system
Yeah.
of foster care that sometimes happens to foster parents. And there are so many different ways. I mean, I always kind of preface it with, because people will hear you talk about taking care of kids and they're like, can't do it, and they shut down.
Right.
But I always preface it with like, wait, you don't have to take kids in your home. There are so many ways that you can support. And yeah, there are cases that are very tragic and kids need to end up in the foster care system.
Yeah.
And we totally understand that. But there are those families that really just don't have anyone that they can depend on. I mean, you have 6 kids, I have 4. If I didn't have a support system, I would not make it.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people don't have that support system. I mean, can you imagine what that would be like?
Well, and I mean, we talk about that, we've got the military base nearby, and I mean, you've seen it. You've had friends that like they come into town and they don't have their parents are 700
Right.
miles away, and they're struggling. They're treading water, and they're not even like doing bad. I mean, this is military people, like they're being taken care of. It's just the stress of not having anybody. And
Yeah.
when we first got licensed, I remember talking with Liv about or I think they mentioned in the classes that like the difficulty with getting in trouble and you've got kids, and if you have money problems or drug problems or whatever, is that you kind of need to balance everything in your life all at once. Like you can't just go
Mhm.
get a job and focus on getting a job. You also need to get a job, and you also need to find a place to stay, and maybe you also need to stay clean while you're under the stress of finding a new job and finding a place to stay. And you
Yes.
also need to like work on your skills to get a better pay. Like there's so many things where a lot of times when people fall into a hard place, it's not just one thing they got to fix. So they
Yeah.
need that, like I said, like they got to come up for air. They need a chance to get their feet under them. And I
Yes.
hate to see the court step in. And so that's why I love what
Yeah.
you guys do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. I mean, we had somebody here locally that we served who moved to the area, was new, literally knew no one, dropped their kid off at school, wasn't feeling well, went to the hospital. She was having a heart attack and
Oh
she
my
had no
goodness.
one, and she was going to leave because she's like, I have to go get my kid from school. There's no one else that can get my kid from school. And what would have happened if Safe Families wasn't able to step in, which the hospital referred her to us, her kid would have ended up in foster care just
Yeah.
because of a lack of options. And there's the perfect example of a parent that just needs some help because of an emergency, and that child doesn't need to end up in the foster care system. And because of the way the system works, and a lot of it is to protect children, so it's necessary. I know you talked about that in one of your videos too. It takes a lot longer to get them out than it does to
Yeah.
get them in. So
Yeah.
Safe Families was able to help and be that support so that she could recover, get back on her feet. It was maybe 5 days, 3 or 5 days of hosting, and then she was fine. So it's a great opportunity to help, kind of close the gap for people who don't have that support.
Yeah, that's why I love it. So, obviously, I've talked about being a foster parent. I'm an adoptive parent, and you were a foster parent as well. What got you into that? Because you're like me, you didn't need to grow your family. You already had
Right.
kids, and I
Yeah.
think people think it's like an adoptive service, or they're like, "Why did you
Right.
do it if you already had kids?" What led you into getting into foster care and getting licensed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had a lot of friends who did that foster care thing, that people don't really understand, and so we were around it a lot. And yeah, as you mentioned, we have two biological sons that are teenagers, and we did struggle with some like secondary infertility, and I just couldn't shake this feeling that some way or another we were meant to care for more kids. There were meant to be more kids in our house, whether that was temporary or permanent. I didn't really know, but I felt like we were, being called to reach out and take care of some more kids. And so we decided to go the foster care route, knowing that the intention is reunification. We
Yeah,
went into it fully knowing and expecting that we would get attached to whatever kids were in our house. We were going to love them as hard as we could, and then
yeah,
they were going to go home to their family, and we were okay with that. That's something that we had to be okay with before we got into it. So our intention never really was to grow our family. Our intention was to go into it with whatever kids need us, we're going to be there for those kids, and whatever their case looks like, we're going to walk that journey with them. And so, we found out about a set of twins through a Facebook page, a local agency that helps foster parents. And we had just gotten licensed. We got our license during COVID times. We were like stuck in the house. Like, I guess this is time to do it. We did all of our online training. And then, I was just waiting for the phone to ring. Like, well, they need us. The kids need us. So my phone, as soon as I turn in this last document, my phone's going to ring, and there's going to be kids in my house instantly. And so when that didn't happen within the first, couple days, couple weeks, I was like, what's going on? So found out about some kids who were actually from, several counties away, who they just couldn't find anybody to take in this placement. They needed to be rehomed from their previous foster home. And without even discussing with my husband, I was like, we'll take them, just put a comment on Facebook. And some friends were like, hey, did you know your wife just said you guys are going to take in 3-year-old twins? And he was like, okay, sounds good.
All
So yeah, so we got involved with our twins, and their case took a very long time. I think, Greg, we actually adopted on the same day that you did, or pretty close to the same time that you guys did.
Yeah.
So they were with us for probably 2 years, 2.5 years. And then we finalized their adoption actually last summer. And yeah, it's just been this kind of wild journey through foster care with these kids, and kind of helping them through, just all of the challenges that they face.
Yeah. Well, and I hopefully as we go, I that's why I'm so glad you're here, because I'm sure you have more answers to this stuff. Because like I said in my own video, like I feel like a cheater, like I feel like a fraud. We had, I mean, nothing. I mean, she was an infant. We never met bio parents. Like we didn't have any drama
Yeah.
like that. The only drama that we ever had was once it became clear that it was moving toward adoption. It just went too slow, in my opinion. But that
Yes,
was
it does
pretty
go
much it.
slowly.
So now everybody has these horror stories, and I'm like, I don't have any horror stories, and it makes me feel like I did something incorrect. I don't know.
Yeah, I
But
understand.
what was the but like, I think a lot of people, so there, you get, I'm sure even more so now working with Safe Families, I'm sure you hear
Mhm.
all of the reasons why people, like there's like 6
Yeah.
stock reasons why people don't want to foster. And you brought up one of them. People are like, well, I'm worried about my own kids. Right. And
Yes.
you had your own kids. How did they
Mhm.
respond? Like, did you involve them in the decision to get licensed? How do they get involved with the foster kids? Like, were they helping?
Yeah.
Were they separate? Were they in danger? How did that look?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Yeah, so our boys, we talked to them a lot about it and kind of the reason why. We tried to just share with them really where we were coming from with it, that there were kids out there who didn't have what seems to be the most like basic level of a safe home and parents to take care of them. So there are kids out there, actually right around you who don't have a safe home to live in. And so we just felt like we were able to help with that situation, therefore we should. And so we talked a lot about that with our boys. They were definitely on board in theory. And then, you get twin 3-year-olds move into your house and you're like, what is happening? And so I'm not going to say that it has been easy. It's definitely not easy. I will say it's worth it. It's very difficult. You're talking about, our youngest son was the baby of the family for 10 years and this rocked his world.
Yeah.
And you're talking about 3-year-olds versus, preteens, and now, they're 6 and the boys are teenagers. So you're talking about big age gap and differences in background and upbringing and all of those things. So it's definitely challenging. When the time came to make the decision on adopting our twins, we also talked to the boys about that. And, they, despite siblings not getting along and all of those things, it was without a doubt that they knew that they wanted these two to be part of our family
Your
forever.
inheritance
So
getting cut in half.
yeah, exactly. I don't even, yeah, I haven't broken that news to them yet, but no, I'm just kidding. So they're on board, but I will say it is definitely just very different. What these two have lived through is so much different than what our bio children have lived through. And so
Sure.
there's a little bit of a lack of understanding. There's a lot of good conversations. And I will say, there were lots of people who said to us, well, what about your kids? Aren't you worried about your kids? And the response that I gave them and our kids is that we are okay with our kids being a little bit uncomfortable. We're okay
Right.
with our kids seeing that the world doesn't revolve around them, that there are people who have it way worse, and that life isn't easy. So if they need to go through something hard in an effort to do something to help someone in need, I think that's okay. And I think it's been a good lesson for them to learn.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And that was we had the exact same conversation. We were like, look, we're gonna, I want to model for my kids what service looks like. I
Yeah.
want to show them that it's not just something that you do maybe at the church building. You go for 2 hours and you do your little service project, and it's usually washing
Mhm.
cars or something, or it's or we're maybe painting somebody's house or whatever. Like, I don't want to demonstrate for you guys that you serve when it's comfortable and in an area where it's convenient for you. Like, that's not always what that looks like.
Right.
So we had the exact same conversations, and this a similar. We didn't have any we didn't, like I said, we didn't have any prior history. She was an infant, but bringing an infant into the house is always like
Yeah.
it's a lot. And ours was in the fall of 19, and then a few months later, COVID ruined
Yeah.
everything. And a friend that Liv had met in licensing class, she also had an infant, and she couldn't find any daycare. Like, there were none.
Right.
So we helped her out. So we had 2 infants for a while during the day, and it was a lot. It was
It
and,
sounds
like,
very
I'm sure
hard.
you have the same issue where you're like, I don't want to rely on the kids too much. Like, I don't want to treat them like little parents and put all this
Right.
responsibility on them. But at the same time, I also want them to engage with the process, and trying to find that
Yes.
balance is tough, where you don't want to feel like you're a slave driver using your children for labor. But at the same time, you're like, I don't want you to feel like you're separate from this, because this is a
Right.
family activity. So that's very
Absolutely.
difficult.
Yeah.
Um, I actually have comments. Zach wants to know if grew up in a Christian home, not practicing now. Do you feel like the church community is essential to fostering? I don't think that it's essential, but I think like, just like we're talking about with the Safe Families organization, I think having people around you to support you is essential to raising children successfully.
Mhm.
And it's not just fostering. I mean, like we said, we live near a military base, and there are a lot of people that get moved in, and they're on their own, and it's really difficult. And it's things like that.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of people, we have a lot of church families that are in the military because it's a supportive environment. That's kind of one of the functions of the church, is that we are there for each other. We do stuff, we watch each other's kids, or we hang out together or whatever. So I don't know that I would call it as essential, But I would say that
Right.
if you are going to foster, you want some people around you. And I know you said you had to do the online classes. I also, because I do shift work, I would recommend everybody do the in-person classes, though. I think you get a lot more, and you meet people, and you meet other foster parents that are they understand you better than anybody. They know what's going
Yes.
on. So yeah, you want to find community somehow.
Totally agree.
So what was I going to ask you? I had it all written down. I still have it written down, but it's just small. All right. Well, so I had posted on my community page, and I've got some questions that I want to go through, and I know that you've got some extra insight to some of these.
Yeah.
And we'll just start off with an easy one here. Is foster care a trial adoption? If not, how is it different? And I know just yesterday I was doing a review of Instant Family, and I think some people are a little confused about this because, like, that movie, I loved that movie. I thought it was great. Everything about it, except one little critique, is that it kind of made foster care seem like a quick path to adoption. Like the movie centered around people that were there to adopt, and that was it. And they kind of treated meeting the bio parents as like a danger, like something they were all sort of living in fear of. Like, what if somebody comes back in the picture? They'll take our kids away. And I don't feel like they really set the tone quite. I mean, obviously you can't cover every aspect of foster care, so it's still a great movie, but I feel like I can see how people are confused this kind of question, because they think that's what, it's like they think of it as like fostering a dog or something. Like, you bring them home for a while, you live there, is it a good fit, whatever. What are your thoughts? Is it a trial adoption in Illinois, especially?
Yeah, I know that I've heard people say foster to adopt, and as soon as you get involved in foster care, at least in Illinois, they will tell you that's not a thing. Foster to adopt is not a thing. The goal of foster care is always reunification, and so you have to be on board with doing everything you can to support the goal. So, throughout the process of the case, your child's case, there's a different goal. So it might start as reunification, and then as things progress, it might, the goal might change to return home, or it might change to termination. So your job is to support that goal while doing everything that you can to keep that child safe. So I would say it's not a trial adoption. I would say, there are people I know who have fostered strictly to foster, and when it gets to that point, when adoption is imminent, then they look to find an adoptive family and still be a part of that kid's life, but in a different way. And I don't know much about that side of it, because that sounds like it would be really just as difficult.
That sounds hard.
I think going into it, what worked best for us was to just go into it completely open-minded with, like, whatever the goal is, we're going to support that. And we're at a place where if that goal does change to adoption, we'll support that too by being that family for those kids. Just because the less that you can disrupt a placement, the less trauma the child is going through, which I think is crucial.
I know some states are different. Like I said, we're both Illinois. Illinois is very strict. Actually, we were told in licensing that, like, if you say the phrase foster to adopt too much, they might blacklist you. They are very against that in this state. But I've heard other states kind of have 3 tracks. They sort of have like adoption and foster, and they do have kind of a foster to adopt for those cases that you're talking about where families are they're in it to foster, like they're very catch and release minded. Like, they are not trying to grow their family. And when it comes to adoption, they're like, I'm sorry, that's not what I signed up for. And then there has to be kind of that middle ground. We have some friends in Missouri. They sort of have, like, when you get licensed in Missouri, you either license to adopt from foster care or you license to foster. Like, they keep it very
interesting.
They keep it very separated. And every part of, we talk about the system being like real broken and everything, and part of the reason that it's broken is A, it's not uniform across the states, and B, it's not uniform across the counties. For anybody that's here that wasn't here 10 minutes ago, Afton was talking about she got into foster care because she saw a Facebook post from someone who couldn't find kids in a different county. And like, so even the counties don't talk to each other, and they talk about like, oh, we can't find beds, or not enough families. And it's like, that is true. There's really not enough families, but also the communication is terrible.
Yes. It's like they don't talk to each other.
It's so bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the where'd it go? How difficult or easy is it to be a foster parent? And I think this is kind of a loaded question. I don't know if they're talking about getting licensed. So
Mm,
I'll briefly cover that. It's pretty
yeah.
easy to get your foster care license. And again, this is like foster care is all about balance. And I do, as much as I hate on them, I feel bad for them. They're in a really tough spot
Same.
because it's all about child welfare. So you can't just be handing out licenses to anybody because you're going to get people that are not there for the right reasons.
Right.
But if they made the bar too high, then it would dissuade people from getting their license, and then they wouldn't have enough. So they have to try to find the sweet spot. But what you do is you call your county. You just look up your DCFS office at your county, or you look for a local foster support group. There are nonprofits that aid foster parents, and they will guide you through the process. But you'll ultimately have to go through Department of Child and Family Services, DCFS, and you will need to fill out a welcome packet. You'll have to. We had to fill out a questionnaire about like our parenting style and how we
Yep.
were raised. What are our thoughts on discipline? How do we solve problems with our own kids if you have any? So there's a big packet of how you approach parenting, kind of a psych eval type thing. As I mentioned in one of my videos, there was like a self check. And one of the questions that's caught me up for quite some time was, are you prepared for reunification? Are you going to support that
Right.
goal? Are you going to work with the caseworker to pursue what's best for the child, not whatever it is that you want? So got to be prepared for that. But then other than that, you got your home check. They're going to make sure that you don't have any dangerous things like I remember weird stuff. Like I had a circular saw out in my garage, and they were like, get that up onto something. Like it was
Yes.
just out, and they were like, get it up high. Just we don't want to see sharp stuff waist level or lower. Or if you are going to be licensed for smaller kids, you need to have your cabinets locked.
Yes.
You have to turn your water heater down. Normal stuff that like when you hear it, you need to have a plan, a written plan for what we do if there's a fire. All my fire monitors have to work. Really basic
Yes.
home check type stuff. Safe home. You have to get your fingerprints, background check. But I think that's about it. And then you have to go to classes.
Yep.
And they're going to teach you about mostly trauma-related behavior in your classes. They're going to teach you about things to expect with kids. Like one of the big things I remember, a takeaway that I had was that a lot of times they were talking about a kid's physical age and their mental age. So
Yes.
sometimes kids will be way more mature than they should be in certain areas because they've seen things that no child should see. And then in other ways, they can be kind of immature, sometimes because they're developmentally disabled or they just haven't been exposed, like they haven't been educated or
Right.
something. So, they talked about that you will see these, they won't behave like a normal 8-year-old, for example, in all areas. Some ways they're very much like a 4-year-old. Some ways they're like a 17-year-old. And it's weird,
Yes.
that imbalance there. But yeah, you'll do your classes, and then like Afton said a few minutes ago, you will submit your license. And we're in Southern Illinois, and they're like, we need people, we're starving, oh my god, second to Chicago, we have the most cases, we're dying. And we did the exact same thing. We submitted the paperwork, and like 2-3 weeks went by, and we were like,
Yeah.
do you guys not like us? Are
Did we
we
put the
not?
wrong number on there or
Yeah, I
something?
feel like we're ready, and then we finally,
Yeah.
when the calls came in, suddenly there were like 6 of them in 1 week. And
Right.
again, their communication is terrible because I could only take a girl. My boy room is full with their square footage requirements, but they still
Right.
called me. They still called, can you take a boy? Can you take a pair of boys? I'm like, no, I can't. Like, doesn't it say that in your system? Like,
Right.
come
I
on.
think they're hoping for anything, honestly. You mentioned it, like you feel bad for them because they are overwhelmed and overworked, and it's a grueling thing to be a caseworker. I'm sure. So you feel bad for them, but yeah, you definitely get calls that are like, no, I can't do that. I listed that on my sheet. So
Yeah. And there is kids with, I don't know if they have exact parameters, but some kids are labeled as 2 kids basically because they have severe enough
yes,
medical problems or something that
yes,
they basically count as 2 kids.
Yes.
as far as your license numbers and your stipend and all that kind of stuff, because they're going to
Yeah.
require a lot of therapy or a lot of visits or that kind of thing. So
And you do have to take extra training for those, because we actually have, they call them specialized. So one of our
yeah.
kids fits that description. And so, yeah, I think he counts as like 1.5 or 2. And you do have to take an extra, I think it's like 6 hours or something worth of training to be able to take care of those kids.
But then the loaded part of this question comes in, because I think getting your license is fairly easy. It takes, it took me like 5 months. I dragged my feet so bad, because I didn't want to go down to the county and get my fingerprints, and I didn't want to find my birth certificate. And like,
It's a pain.
I was born in Arkansas, so like I had to file for it and have it sent. And it's just like, I'm not good with paperwork stuff. It bothers me. So, and then, then you have to get your classes in. And it's honestly, I find that's another reason I don't like the online classes, because when you can take them whenever, I will never take them. I am a
That's a good
habitual
point.
foot dragger. So other than if you're a procrastinator like me, getting your license is very easy. But then there are the unique difficulties of just being a foster parent. And the number one thing is just having an extra kid in your house. I mean, that's, I try to stress to people something that I really like to say a lot is that, like, yeah, like there are specialties. Obviously, like I don't want to pretend like foster care is like, oh, it's no big whoop. But really, a lot of the difficulties of having foster kids are similar to the difficulties of having children. They're loud.
Sure.
They sometimes talk back to you. They don't want to do stuff. They're not always, smart. They don't do what is clearly the obviously smart thing to do. They will annoy you because they can't find things that are in the middle of the room. It's a lot of it is the same stuff you would have if you just had children. And then there's a little icing on top because they have trauma related behaviors.
Yes.
And I think that's where the difficulty comes in, because you can't parent trauma behavior in the exact same way. Do you feel comfortable talking about some of that, like some of the behavioral type stuff that maybe you've dealt with?
For sure. I think that's the hardest thing, the thing that, despite the training, I thought I was ready for, but I really wasn't ready for it, because I think
they're all different.
Everything that you learn, I still think there was an element of like, well, if I just love them enough and I just teach them enough and I just, raise them the right way, it's going to be fine. It'll be just like raising our bio kids. And it's just totally not. And so we've done extra classes, on trauma and TBRI, which is, trust-based relational interactions, I think, which is just a trauma approach to parenting and the way that you interact with your kids. And so I think that's been our hardest part, is that, we raised our bio kids kind of like, well, we're in charge and this is what we say the rule is. And so therefore you follow the rule. Like, I think they call it like complete obedience, right? And you try to do that to kids who come from a trauma background, and you are not going to be very successful. And we were very unsuccessful for a while trying to figure out, like, what is the deal? Like, what do you mean they're just going to like say no and throw themselves on the floor and have this meltdown? And I've dealt with temper tantrums from toddlers, but this is like next level where, they don't even know what's happening. It's like an out of body experience for them. So it is so much different than I feel like I was prepared for. And it's been the hardest thing to understand. But this TBRI, this trauma informed parenting is so, it's like magic. It really does change your approach, and it changes their response, and it builds that relationship at the same time, because, what you learn about trauma is that the things that they've gone through, even if, it hasn't been a physical abuse or anything like that, being removed from your parent is a very traumatic life event. And that trauma rewires your brain a little bit. And so they're trying to overcome and heal their brains from this traumatic incident. And the only way to do that is through relationship. And so that's been kind of the biggest thing for us, is kind of changing our mindset and the way that we parent and the way that we approach them to be more relational first. And it feels kind of counterintuitive. If you were raised in a home where, well, my parents are the boss, they said this is the rule, I follow the rule, that's it, or I get grounded or whatever. And if you raised your kids that way, it's very counterintuitive. But once you kind of learn that it's completely different, and accept that you have to come at it with a different approach, you're going to be a lot more successful. And I think that's the hard thing as a foster parent kind of out in the wild too, like out in the world, is that people don't understand and can get really judgy about what your kids are
Yeah.
doing and their behaviors and the way that you're responding to it, and be very critical of that style, when really it is about trying to help them, because they don't want to be having those moments either. They don't want to feel that way. They don't like what they're doing, but they
Yeah.
need somebody to come alongside and walk through that with them so that they can continue to learn how to heal from that and how to grow and mature in that way.
Yeah. The I keep coming back to this Instant Family movie because I was shocked at how clearly how much research had gone into it.
Yeah.
Have you seen that movie? The Mark
No,
Wahlberg?
because I knew it was going to make me cry a
Oh, it's
lot,
gonna
and
make you.
so
It
I
made
just
me cry
haven't
a lot, like
I
so
haven't
much.
gotten to it
And I was
yet.
on the couch.
But
I was trying to be stoic about it, just letting them roll down a little bit, not doing the sob, noises. But
yeah,
oh, it's a jerker there. It's bad.
for
But
an ugly cry, I'll definitely pull that one up.
what's interesting though is that it touches, you can tell they really put a lot of work into it, and they didn't get away from the ugly parts of it, and they kind of touch on some of those behaviors. They get these three siblings, and one of the boys, they're they go there's multiple scenes where they go to a foster support group, and they talk about he's really difficult because he doesn't really think through things, but then you can't correct him
Yes.
because he falls apart instantly. And they're like, we don't know how to parent
Yes.
this kid because he will get in the fetal position and scream don't hit me. And they're like, I've never hit you. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
That's
Yes.
crazy. You can't respond that way when I correct you. Or the older kids deal with loyalty issues, and they touched on that, where the mom is trying to connect with this teenage girl, and she brushes her hair. It's a really sweet scene, and they really connect. And then 2 days later, the girl throws the comb away and kind of has a tantrum because she feels disloyal to her mother. You're trying to take my mother's place, and and there's all these emotions that go into it.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and they're not rational, and that's the issue. That's what's so
Yes.
difficult, is they're not rational emotions. They don't make any sense, and like you said, the kids don't want to be feeling it either. But
Yeah, and I mean they're used to kind of losing everything they have at a moment's notice. I can remember really early on, this really dumb battle with my daughter where I was like, "Hey, I need you to put the bath toys away. We're done with our bath. Time to put the bath toys away." And she's like, "No." I'm like, "Fine, I'll throw the bath toys away." She's like, "Go ahead. I don't care. Throw the bath toys away." And I'm like, "Great, I'm going to." And so I get out a trash bag and I put all the bath toys in the trash bag. And I'm like, she legitimately does not care. I was waiting for her to go, "No, wait, I'm sorry. I'll clean up my bath toys." She really does not care, because that's, she's lost. And I mean, she's 3 or 4 at this time. So I don't think that she's going, "Well, I've lost so many things in my life that I don't really care. This doesn't mean anything to me." But it's all in there that, they don't, it's just not that rational thinking that we're necessarily used to seeing in other parenting scenarios. Like you said, it's not the same level of logic that you think you can get away with on a kid. And so
yeah.
I learned a valuable lesson that day. She's not trying to, call my bluff, and I was trying to call hers, and she's like, "Go ahead, whatever."
And that's that maturity. I got J.R. Carroll talking about. I wanted to bring this up earlier when you were talking about that mother that was sick, and nobody she wanted to leave after having a heart attack. So Joseph mentioned this in one of the videos. He talked about this in a comment, and this is the kind of stuff that Safe Families is here for. He said his parents got sick, or his dad got sick, I believe is what he said in the comment. And, he had to be taken in a foster care. And like you said, it's 6 months. And I'm sure that his dad didn't need 6 months to recover. But once you go in, they're like, "Oh, well, you have to work a plan, and you have to meet milestones. Yes. And we can only check on those milestones when there's court, and court is backed up 5 months. So your next date."
And it can get delayed, "Oh, somebody didn't show up, so there's no court today, even though you planned on it." Yeah. It probably could have been a lot shorter time, if there was a Safe Families, that Safe Families family that could step in and help.
Yeah. And there is something that I wanted to bring up, because somebody mentioned this in a comment. I found this Charity Navigator here, and Safe Families has excellent ratings as far as their overhead. I know a lot of people get worried about this because you hear about some of these really big charities that have 10 cents on the dollar actually goes to somebody, right? Safe Families is a really lean organization. And if you go into their public stuff here, the last 3 years, they're really growing. So that's a big deal. in 2020 they had like a total budget of $5 or $6 million, and now, I'm sorry, they're up to like 10. So it's a growing organization for sure. But you can see here that like about 80% year over year is actually going to their program to help people.
Yeah.
And it says here your cost of fundraising is really low as well. Like it only costs 5 cents to raise $1. So
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that as far as, if you're worried about overhead, if you're worried about, only a
Yeah.
nickel of your dollar actually going to help somebody, Safe Families is not that. They are a tight organization, and they're not
Yes.
wasteful with your money.
Yeah, I can tell you when I got involved working for Safe Families, that was something that really stood out to me, is that we are very frugal. We're very financially responsible because we know that people are donating to us to be able to do what we do. And so, we try to be really responsible with all the funds that come to Safe Families. And that number that you gave, we're talking about, 120 chapters across 40 states. And then we also have chapters in Canada and the UK and Hong Kong. So that number is kind of all in, not just, these local branches that you might see. So yeah, we definitely run on a really tight budget and try to make wise decisions so that we can help as many people as possible. That's really the goal.
Yeah. Ejecta wants to know how difficult it is for people who don't have kids become foster parents. So the process is the same whether you have kids or not. And honestly, I think that you've got unique challenges whether you have kids or you don't. Like, and I was talking about this with Liv. If you have kids, you have the advantage of like, well, I've raised kids before. At least I know a few of the general principles of parenting. So you've got that going on. But then, as you said, that also presents a little bit of a disadvantage because you have some expectations going in of parenting, and these kids might not meet that. And I think that is one of the advantages. If you don't have children and you foster, you kind of don't have the shoulds in your brain. You don't have like, and I'm sure you had this with your second son, your second biological son, where he didn't do everything exactly as your older son, and you're like, oh my, is he late? Is he what's going on? Like, my oldest was walking at 10 months and 2 weeks, and this one it's 10 months and 3 weeks, and he's not walking. Oh my God, what's going on, right? So like, if you don't have kids, you don't bring any of that to the table, and that can be its own advantage because you take those foster kids as they are without any prior expectation as parents would have. So I don't think either one. Obviously, I don't have experience in fostering without kids, but I can see that they both have challenges and advantages, unique to each situation. But getting your license without kids, they don't care. The agency doesn't care if you have kids or not.
I think the difficulty is if you don't have kids and you're wanting to start a family, the supporting the goal of reunification. If you can still do that, support that goal of reunification until it changes, until the goal changes, and then support what that goal is. As long as you can do that, I think that's what I would anticipate is a difficulty, is if you don't have children and you want to have children and then you have foster kids, that could be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. So I think here's a good question. Obviously, I mean, I'm going to tell you, donate to Safe Families. But what is, aside from that, what's a good way to support foster parents and foster kids if you don't want to get your own license?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we talk about Safe Families. Safe Families is all about a support system, right? And we've also talked about the difficulties of being a foster parent and people being like, what's wrong with your kids? Like, why are your kids so bad? And so having people around you that get it, that understand what your kids are dealing with, understand how you're trying to help them heal through their trauma and grow and learn in a different way than maybe what they're used to. I think that's the best support that you can give, because we all need a break, right? And, in-laws, parents can only do so much. And so having people that you trust with your kids, that kind of get your kids and understand where they're coming from and can just love them, is really just a huge help. And then, if you can be a support with, when things come up, and I know we had people bring us meals. So one of our sons had, several surgeries, and people brought us meals. Like, just being able to do things that kind of take a load off of a foster family is so huge. And, and just being able to be somebody that they can call and vent to me, those are the things that I kind of appreciate the most, are people who love my kids and understand them and aren't trying to fix them. They just want to care for them and not try to turn them into better kids. They can just love them
Right.
kind of where they're at, and then they can be trusted with them if we need help with our kids, or they need somebody to watch them for a little bit. I think that's a huge support. But I'd be curious to know what you think too, Greg.
So I know that there are nonprofits, and I need Liv to come in here because I can never remember the one that we worked with. They were great, but I just can never remember the name. But until I can get a hold of her, um I
You're talking about like
recommend to
Restore
people.
Network?
That's what it was. I can never remember what it
Yes.
was for. I don't know why I can't remember that name. But in Southern Illinois,
Yeah.
there's the Restore Network, and they are a nonprofit, and basically they try to come alongside DCFS because DCFS is a skeleton crew, and they basically,
Yes.
like when we first got our placement, they brought us some clothes, they brought us some diapers. They have shoppers that will maybe go get a couple outfits for you, or we had like we were supposed to get a blood draw on a Saturday, and we went to the hospital, and they're like, we don't have, or it was a whole confusion, and we're like, we don't know what to do, and they're like, are you her parents? And we're like, no, we're not, but we don't know what to put on this paper. And so we called the Restore
Right.
Network, and there was somebody there, like, and we had the personal cell number of this woman there, Ashley, and we were like, hey, we called her on her personal cell at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, like, hey, we're trying to get a blood draw. Like, do we say that we're the parents? What do we say? Like, how do we
Right.
not get in legal trouble? So like having being one of their shoppers, or like you said, just being one of their supporters to just work with
Yeah.
foster families, because especially when you get new placements, it's a lot of stress. But the other
Yeah.
thing I think a lot of people don't know is that you can go get your foster license. It's super, like I said, it's not hard. It's not, it doesn't take a ton of time, just the classes. But what you can do is you can offer respite care, because
Yeah.
you have to be licensed to have kids. Like if a kid is a foster kid in the system, then they have special treatment, and they can't just go anywhere, right? Because the state has to track them. And so they're starting, like, I know in Illinois, they're starting to loosen things up. Like they're allowed to stay the night at a friend's house one night, because they're trying to introduce normalcy for these kids. Like they don't want them to feel so weird. Or like we live close to St. Louis. They're like, yeah, cross state boundaries for a couple hours. Obviously, you don't need to get our written permission to go to St. Louis. That's stupid. Like that's fine, right? So they're easing up. But suppose you're a foster family and your relative out of state dies, and you need to go to a funeral, and the bio parents like, no, you can't take my kid across state lines. And because bio parents still have rights, and I think that's another thing that surprises people, is that depending on their involvement and how much the court allows them to be involved, you need their permission for a lot of things, and they can tell you no on a lot of things, and you can't take the kid out of state. So if you get a foster license, and you can let them know up front, like, I don't want to be a foster parent, and that's fine. You can provide respite care, which is like 1 week you take a foster family's foster kid because they need to leave the state. They have an emergency or something to that effect. So it's similar to what Safe Families does for, struggling families. It's what you could do for foster families that need a week or two, and they're not legally allowed to take their kid out of state.
Right. That's a great point.
Let's see. This is an interesting one. Do foster kids get to stay in their placement? For us, I think they asked her, but she was 3. So like, it was more like, it was just kind of a cutesy thing. The judge was like, do you want them to be your mommy and daddy? And like, yeah, absolutely. Like, but when we drove out to Washington County, because some friends of ours said it's a smaller place. It's not crowded. It's, and it was very nice. It was very, cozy. And there was another family that was also adopting, and they were adopting some teenagers. And like a lot of it takes place before the adoption with the agency and everything, but still in court, the judge was like, are you, did these people give you anything? Did they give you any drugs before you came here? Are you
Are they
sound
paying
mind?
you?
Do you really want these people to be your parents? So I think it depends on the age. Your kids were what, 5 when they were adopted?
Yes. Yeah.
So
They were 5.
Were they old enough to kind of get a little more of a one-on-one with a caseworker and a judge, and get their permission and stuff?
Yeah. So we did actually meet with an attorney, because we adopted through foster care. We kind of had a list of attorneys that we could pick from to help us through this process. And so we met with an attorney. He was great. He actually had a dog that was like a therapy dog. So
Nice.
he had this dog in his office with him to talk with the kids. And he did kind of pull the kids to the side to talk to them. I mean, they were 5. So, I don't know that there was like, a ton that they could really understand, but they very much understood that this was going to be their forever family, that their last name was going to change, you know, that they were going to be Spriggses. And so he did talk to them one-on-one kind of about that, and then talk to us as well, which, you know, I think is good. And when caseworkers would come too, they would talk to them one-on-one, you know, make sure that they were safe and cared for and felt comfortable where they were. But you know, I think in some cases I have heard of with older kids, and really, I would butcher all of the legal terms, so I'm not even going to try. But I have heard of when there are situations where, you know, they might return home or change situations with guardianship or things like that, where the kid was older and did have a little bit more of a say, more like a teenager, and saying that they wanted to stay with this family that they had been with for, you know, 4 or 5 years or something. And so I think they do take that into consideration sometimes when the kids are older.
Yeah. I've got one from the chat. Is there instances where the family, the bio family presents a risk, like they attempt to take the foster kid from your home, violence, etc.? This is another one of those. You know, I get a lot of people are worried about foster care because they feel that they're putting their family at risk with foster care. Like they're worried about my kids. What, you know, what's a foster kid going to do to my kids, or how's this going to affect my kids, or will I have to give too much attention to the foster kid and not to my kids? And then this is another common one that, like, what if, you know, the bio family comes after me or something? The state does a very good job. And I want you to take over, because you had visitations, but they told us, like, they don't know you. Oftentimes you won't even have to show up to visitation. Your caseworker will, or they'll arrange it or whatever. So, like, if you don't want to, you don't ever have to see the bio parents. Like, you never have to meet them face to face. Oftentimes it can be a good idea, like, especially if you're a stable home. Like, if you know, if you're an adult that's got your crap together, it can be a nice bit of support to be like, not only am I watching your kids, but I want to see you succeed. And if you need tips or whatever, like, it just depends, you know, if they are not somebody that's really good for the kid to be around, then yeah, you don't want to meet them privately. But what was your what was your parental visit stuff like?
Yeah, so when our kids did have visits with bio parents, like you said, there was a caseworker, like an assistant, who came and picked them up from daycare, took them to the facility where they were going to have their visit, and then would bring them home. And so because of the nature of their situation, we chose not to take it any further than that, the relationship. We did see bio parents. We were still kind of like at the tail end of COVID time, so some of our hearings were on Zoom, and so we would see them on some of the hearings. And then when it got to the point of termination, we were in court with them, with bio family, and that's really hard, because you know, you're trying to do what's best for the kids, and what, you know, what the court and the state are saying is best for the kids. But it's a really sad situation. It's not like, yay, we won. It's just a really sad and kind of broken situation that you're walking into. And so it's really difficult. You know, we did have some contact with some family members, and our caseworker kind of helped us with facilitating a different phone number that they could communicate with us, or like an app where they could communicate with us so that everybody felt safe. But you know, I would say that in our experience, and with the experience of some of our friends, we've never had the issue of you know, attempting to take a kid, or any kind of violence or things like that. So, you know, thankfully we haven't had to walk through that.
Yeah, the state does a good job of keeping the walls up and keeping separation where it needs to be, for your family safety and for the kids, so that they don't try to come after them. And you know, every case is different. Obviously, you've got some where you're like, nah, I don't really want to get involved with that. Or, you know, it's also a possibility that you might want to try, and the bio parents hate you because they, you know, you're taking care of their kids and they can't, and they feel, you know, guilt or shame, or they're angry, or you know, there's a whole spectrum of emotions that goes into that with the bio parents, and it creates a lot of complications. But they so for us, when we went to adoption, I know one of the questions here was like, what's the process of adoption? For us, since we didn't have any contact with the parents, it was like, the court will make a judgment and say, okay, we are we're basically declaring your parental rights to be removed.
Mhm.
And like you said, that's like when that happened for us, even like we didn't even know the parents, and we still were not just like, yes, we got them. Like it's,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like it's a weird mix of emotions because on the one hand, you love these kids. So you're like relieved, like, okay, good. This is secure. I love you. And like, we're going to take care of you. And this is going to be more permanent. And that is exciting. Like, and it's okay to be
Mhm.
happy about that. But at the same time, you also feel like, but I'm celebrating somebody's kids getting taken from them. And it's a very
Right.
weird, it's a very surreal feeling. Um, but you know, depending on the state, like I said, every county is different. The parents basically, when the kids get taken in, the parents get some kind of orders, like you need to
Mhm.
attend this many therapy sessions or anger management sessions, or you know, you need to, you know, be clean for this long, or this community service, or whatever it is that the court that they give them like
Yes.
a track. And typically, what we have been told is they'll get a few chances. There will be some relapses. That's pretty common, and the court knows that. That um, you know, slip ups happen. Somebody falls off the wagon or whatever. But
Yeah.
then after a certain amount of time, either it becomes clear that they're just not going to try, or oftentimes the parents themselves realize that like it's just not working, and they just don't want to fight anymore, and they kind of give up, and they sort of fade away.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, legally, the court just says, okay, we are officially declaring this child has no parents. We're legally stripping rights from the parents, and they officially become a ward of the state. And at
Yes.
that point, it moves into the status changes at that point to seeking adoption. And
Mhm.
then you've got more paperwork at that point. A
Yes.
lot of it's
More
the
court
same
hearings.
paperwork. Oh man.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was kind of an interesting that was an interesting deal too, because they have to gather all the medical stuff,
Yes.
because they, right before it's officially done, they came to us with a big giant packet, and every scrap of official information they could find on this kid.
Yes.
And we were like, what is all this about? Because for like, I was confused because again, I had her since she was an infant. So I'm like, I already know everything about this kid. Like, there's nothing in this packet you're going to tell me that, you know, and since you can't find her parents, you don't have any family history that you can give me that I don't already know about either. So like, this feels kind of pointless. But they were like, well, we have to do this. And our legal person, she's like, not to put this in like really ugly terms, but like people have sued the state almost like a lemon law car. Like,
Yes.
you gave me a dysfunctional kid and you didn't disclose background stuff. And so apparently people have like sued to get out of their adoption
Which is
because they
crazy.
didn't know things were in the child's background. So that was a big, I didn't realize there was a several month period where we didn't really hear much. And that's what was going on, is they were compiling all the information, making this massive dossier
Yes.
on this kid, so that they could say, we did every ounce of due diligence, that here is every piece of information we could possibly find.
Yeah.
So you can't claim you don't really know anything about this kid before you adopt him.
Yeah, I have 2 giant stacks over my shelf, one for each kid that's like,
I was going to say,
just
yours has got to be
massive,
enormous. The older they
massive.
are, the longer it gets.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was interesting for us was because until you get to that point, there's a lot of information you're not allowed to have. You kinda get the
Yeah.
bare minimum, and we got a lot more of their story by getting more of that paperwork, and one of the biggest things that we didn't know and that all of us were dying to know is because they're twins, we didn't know who was born first, so we didn't know who was
You
older
never got
because
to find out.
we didn't
Oh,
have time of birth. We only had, like, kind of a whatever birth certificate was needed to kind of get through the bare minimum. We didn't have all of the details on their births, and so we didn't know who was older. And that was like the question that everybody wanted to know, was who was older and who was younger. So we finally got that information, which
well,
was
that's
exciting.
exciting.
Yeah,
Somebody wanted to know. So I had a couple questions from the same person, kind of talking
yeah,
about a lot of it revolved around adoption, which again depends on your state. You know, some are more open to foster to adopt, some are not. And we're in
hmm,
Illinois, and they're very against it here. But foster or adopting from foster care is free,
yeah,
since what you have to remember is when you're a foster parent, you're basically you do get paid. And what you have to remember is you're pretty much a contract worker for the state. You're like a live-in daycare. Like, that's kind of how you need to think of yourself.
yeah,
And so people are like, oh, they pay. Well, yeah, they pay you because you're providing at the base legal level, you're providing a service to the state because these kids are wards of the state, and so they have to pay you to take care of them. In Illinois, I think it's like $5.50 a month, which we still get after adoption. I think they did that a long time ago. I'm assuming that's because people were like not adopting kids out of foster care because they didn't want to stop the checks or whatever. So
yeah, I don't know.
I don't know why.
Probably.
They keep going till they're 18, and they also get free state college, which is kind of cool. So there's some benefits to them to get them on their feet, because a lot of kids in the system, they kind of fall. I mean, depending on their age, they provide them a lot of support so that they do not repeat any of this stuff, and they kind of, launch as they get older. And yeah, you're right. They do the healthcare, and the state continues to take care of the kids even after adoption. They still check up on them and all that kind of stuff. But no, there's no fee. But it's like I said, I like to stress to people, it's not an adoption service. And if you look at it like an adoption service, unless you live in a state where there's like a specific foster to adopt track, and like it's kids that have a status that's clearly they're not going home, and like it's very everybody's understanding of that, you are liable to get your heart broken, because I looked up some stats. The stats I found were that about 75% of kids go home nationwide. That tails into this other question here. I found some stats that just said like 25% usually end in adoption, and the other 75% go home. So the chances are high that parents are going to get their stuff together, or a relative is going to show up, and those kids are going to go home.
Right.
What do you guys at Safe Families, do you have stats on this kind of stuff? Like, what's the average length of fostering? Anything like that you have numbers to toss around?
Yeah, I think that they said that the average, I think I do have that somewhere. I don't know if I have the length, but I know that like the average cost of fostering, that it's like $40,000 per kid. And I think that it's like at least a year, 2 years, something like that. And I believe in Illinois, the reunification rate is much lower. I want to say it's closer to like 46% reunification rate in the state of Illinois.
I mean,
we're pretty bad as far as the entire country goes. Illinois is one of the worst, unfortunately.
For a lot of reasons, not just in fact. Illinois it's not a lovely state. It's not very good.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln would be very sad that this is the land of him.
He would not want his name associated with it.
Well, I mean, you and I both. I mean, you and I both failed our first foster into adult. Like, so I mean, the numbers are a little higher here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that the average length here is closer to like 2 years. It takes a long time, and there is some. You kind of get that to an extent, because you mentioned Illinois is very much against fosters who adopt. Totally understand. And they want to give parents time to get back on their feet. That is definitely needed. And so the process takes a long time. So I think that's another reason that people are kind of deterred from foster care, is that it's so long. You don't know how long it's going to take. You can get caught up in red tape, and you could just be kind of stalled out for months and months at a time. And so I think that's another thing that I try to encourage people who want to help kids but aren't able to commit to years of the unknown, that with Safe Families, our placements are all very temporary. They have a set start and end date, and those kids are going home.
Liv mentioned we also didn't know her middle name until we got that big packet. So we just had nothing for the longest time, and then you get the packet and you're like, wow, I thought I did know everything about this kid. Nope, I didn't know the middle name.
I mean, that's crazy to not know the middle name. That's a big one.
I still don't know if her mom named her or if the nurses did. We still don't, and that's not even in the official stuff. Like, I mean, obviously we have the official name on paperwork and stuff, but I don't know who came up with that one.
Oh, that's very interesting. I always say there's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say that I always say that there are some pieces that we're just never going to know. Like, there are some parts of our kids' stories that we're just never going to know, because they aren't necessarily weren't old enough to remember it, so they won't be able to tell it. And so some of those pieces we're just not going to know. Yeah,
that's true. Did you have any bad caseworker interactions?
I I mean, we had a great
That sigh
caseworker.
said yes.
We had a great caseworker. We had bad licensing worker issues. So our
Oh,
situation's a little bit different because we are licensed through DCFS. But because we kind of raised our hand and we're like, oh, we want to take these kids from another county, they were through a private agency, a third party foster care agency. So our caseworker was through the agency. So essentially what happens is that agency asks DCFS if they can borrow your license. So if they can use your license to house one of their kids. And so
yeah.
we had a bad situation with a licensing worker where we were getting ready to move. And you can't just like move when you have foster kids, right? Like they need
No.
to know where you are. They have to look at your house and inspect everything. So when we started the process of selling our house and moving, I emailed our licensing worker, hey, just a heads up, our house is on the market. We're looking to move, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. Tried again. Hey, just so you know, we actually sold our house and we have a closing date. Here's our closing date. Hey, we're moving. Like, this is our new address. This is happening. I'm taking these kids and I'm moving to this house. And so, nothing. So finally, like a supervisor stepped in and said, hey, so-and-so is gone or is on some kind of leave, or it was very mysterious. And so I'm going to be stepping in to do your licensing check, because when you're a licensed foster home, they have to come out every like 6 months or something to do another check just to make sure that everything is still safe, check your smoke detectors, do all the things. So I was like, great, that sounds great. And so then she calls me and she says, I'm at your house and I've just been told that you don't live here. And I was like, right,
Yeah, we
moved.
tried to tell you a lot.
I told our licensing worker, I sent all the information that should be in my file. And she's like, no, it's not in your file. We did not know that. What is your address? I'll meet you there. So, because I was ready for our check. So she shows up at her house and she was like, you can't just move and take these kids. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's what I've been saying for like 3 months. And so I actually showed her the whole paper trail of our emails where I said, we're moving, and getting no response. And she says to me, well, it's a good thing that you had this paper trail, because we would be taking these kids from you today. And I was like devastated.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, do you have people knocking down the door to be foster parents where you're just going to take these kids away from us? Like, really?
Exactly.
And at that point, parental rights had been terminated. So we were their fictive kin. So our caseworker from the agency came, and I was devastated. I was all shaken up, like, oh my gosh, I almost lost our kids today. Like, they were almost taken from us. Here we are almost to adoption. And she's telling me I was going to take your kids away from you. And she said, well, that's not true. They couldn't take your kids from you because their parental rights have been terminated.
Right.
But she was so awful to us about that. And I'm like, look, I tried to do everything that I could, and I could get a hold of no one. So it was a very upsetting interaction. But other than that, like we had great caseworkers. Even when one of ours went on maternity leave, another one stepped in, and then she went on maternity leave, and ours came back. And so we had some kind of shifting around, but everything actually went really smoothly, which I'm thankful for, because I have heard horror stories from others.
Yeah. Ours, I mean, I can't say horror stories. Like, there was goofy stuff. I mean, the biggest one I talked about in the video was like the ACR process, which I think is a joke.
Yeah.
That was
yes.
It honestly felt like a waste of time toward the end. And I talked about the one where everybody just has different rules that they know of, or you told somebody something and they didn't tell anyone, and then they either leave or they get they shuffle around a lot, and so you get somebody new and they're like, no, we've never heard of that. You're like, well, I told so and so. They're like, well, so and so's not here anymore. You're like, well, great. So I'm just up a creek at this point. And we had a similar. They didn't threaten to take our kids, but we were still shaken up about it because, like, the tone, they acted like we were terrible, like we weren't fit to foster this kid, because we had an ACR. And they were like, okay, we're doing the checkups. Have you done such and such, this and this? And yeah, and like, have you taken them to the dentist? And we were like, well, we did. We took them to our family dentist, and they said they don't really do 2 and 3 year olds because it's just not worth it. It scares the kids. They get all freaked out. They hate the dentist for life. And he's like, unless I see, like, he looked in their mouth, but he's like, unless I see something obvious, I don't do toddler cleanings and whatever. And this lady was like, you what? You what? When they turn 2, you've got to take them to the dentist. And she was like so freaked out about it. And
Yeah.
we were just like, and yeah, she acted like we had broke a major rule and we needed to rectify it immediately. And we were all shaken about like, oh my God, have we broken a rule? Are they going to come take our kid? You know, like, yeah, they get heated about really simple stuff. And I feel like everybody has a handful of rules they've committed to memory. They're like, these are the ones that are important to me. I'm going to enforce these. And then you talk to a different, and like every, I don't know, 12 to 18 months, you get a different caseworker. And they're like, no, that's not important.
Why would they? What? No.
Why would they care about that? That's stupid. Anyway, here are my handful of rules that I think are very important.
Yes.
So we're going to go with those.
Yes. I can remember sitting down and like being prepared for like the meeting with the license worker and then being like, oh, I don't care about any of this. And I was like, well, the last person cared about all of this. And I spent all of this time collecting all of these things for you. And they're like, that's great. I don't really care.
Yeah, we appreciate it, but no, it's not important. Let's see here. I know somebody had a question on this one. My daughter's Black, so this one I've got obviously I don't care about fostering outside of race, and I adopted, and I know that it comes with challenges. And there was like there's been a big kerfuffle online. This fella here, Michael Chandler, adopted a pair of boys, one a couple of years ago and then the other. And I guess he was in an interview and they were like, how are you going to raise these Black sons? And he was like, I'm not raising Black children. I'm just raising children. And then he went on and he had this whole thing. Like, basically, if you're a man or a woman, or if you're Black or you're white or whatever, like there are just certain traits there are certain traits to being a good human being. And so they just kind of transcends good. So he had like a more of an explanation, but of course everybody's just going on this one little quote right here. And there's all kinds of reactions and all kind of stuff. My personal feeling on it is it's obviously very complicated. And like I said, I'm not against it. I did it and I'm working with it right now. And there are things, there's like every kid, like we've said, every kid presents their own unique challenges, right? Sometimes you have behavioral challenges. Sometimes you have medical challenges. Or sometimes you've got cultural challenges. And like, we've had to learn how to do hair. We've had to learn how to, braid weave in and take care of her skin. And like, there's a whole slew of hygienic things that I didn't know about. Right. Like, and I had and I felt like an idiot because I'm asking my Black coworkers, I'm like, hey, we're going to go to the beach. Like when she was little, and I was like, do you guys sunburn? Or is that like, do I have to put suntan lotion? And they're like, yeah, we sunburn. You have to put and I'm like, I don't know. You guys are dark. I don't know if that works. So like, yeah, there's all kind of goofy crap that I've got to manage and bumble my way through. And honestly, at this point, I'm not having issues with it because she's 4. She's adorable. Like, she's the cutest little thing. So nobody has said anything mean. I'm sure later on in life they will. The worst part is just like internet stuff. Like we were looking up YouTube tutorials from this woman that we used to buy product from, and we don't anymore because she just started to irritate us. And like throughout the videos, she just would make comments about like how her whole platform on YouTube was like, I don't want you white folks taking care of Black babies, but if you're going to, I might as well teach you how to take care of the hair. And like, it was informative. So, I got some value out of it. But after a while, Liv was like, all right, I'm tired of being like, I'm trying. And I feel like your attitude is terrible.
Right.
And we don't get, like, when she and I are out with the toddler, just the 3 of us, we don't get weird looks because I feel like that's like, they're like, oh, those people can't have kids, they adopted. Okay, that's pretty normal. The only time I get weird looks is when it's all of us. So it's 7 white people and then this little, and she's much shorter than the rest of it. It's a little Black girl. And you can like, people don't look judgmental. They look confused. They're like, what are the circumstances that led to this grouping? Or they're looking around like for another Black family. Like, did that kid get lost? Did she accidentally just go with that group? Like, but I've never seen anybody look at me like disgusted or, the internet is a weird place, but real life is not the internet. But they are looking. We had at the end of school just ended recently, and one of the dads came up and he was like, hey, school's about to end. I'm never going to see you guys again. So I'm just going to ask, like, did you adopt her? What's going on? Like, he just went to the last
deal here.
And yeah, he was like, whatever, I don't care. I'm never gonna see you again. I'm just gonna ask what I want to ask. And so yeah, we're like, yeah, she's a foster kid and we've adopted her or whatever. And he's like, oh, well, I just want to say that her hair always looks good. Like I've noticed that her hair always looks really good. You're taking good care of her hair and her skin, and you're putting clothes, colors on her that complement her and everything. And I was like, I mean, first of all, for like 2 weeks, we were like glowing. We're like, oh my God, yes, we got a real compliment. But also I realized like he's been noticing for months, like he's been looking for months to make sure
Oh,
that we're taking
yeah.
care of this kid. So they're watching, they're making sure that, we're doing it right. But at this point, no, I'm not having any issues. And I know that later on, when she's older, she's going to be like, why don't I look like you? Why don't, and there's a
Sure.
lot of complications there. But one, what I want to ask you and everybody that is watching is when you're filling your license out, that's the question that did your licensing agent make a big deal out of it? Did they even ask you, or did they just check all, or like, how did that process go for you?
It was part of the process. I know that it was part of the training too. They kind of talk about that. Um, and I know when we filled out our paperwork, we had to get into specifics of, race and age and gender and all of those things. And so again, and maybe this is naive and maybe this is the wrong answer, I don't really know, but because we were really truly just trying to come at it without any preconceived notions of what we wanted outside of like, you know, wanting to do younger kids because our kids were older. Outside of that, we didn't really put any other stipulations on it because we just wanted to be there for whoever needed us. It sounds kind of cheesy, but that was really the approach that we tried to keep in mind the whole time, was being open to whatever came our way because that's who needed help and that's who we were going to help.
Yeah, and it's not cheesy. We were in the exact same boat. We just, because we weren't trying to grow our family, we were like, well, I don't really care, because I never thought we were going to adopt. So I was like, I don't care what this kid looks like, because 18 to 24 months, we're going to take this kid in, their parents are, and they're going to go home, and like, who cares, right? Like, I don't care. And yeah, that didn't work out. But I was with you, and I, as I mentioned in the first video this month, like, it doesn't matter what you like. Somebody's going to tell you that you made the wrong decision no matter what. Because if you say, yeah, all foster kids of any color, they're like, well, you don't know about their culture. You can't provide for them in the ways they need to, whatever. But then the other option is, nope, I'm only taking white kids. And it's like, well, that sounds horribly racist as well.
Yeah,
So there's
absolutely.
I wouldn't tell anybody that they're wrong for either of those choices. I just know that that's a tough choice. Either way, you could talk yourself out of either one of them.
I totally agree.
That dovetails into this this question here. Can you request certain age, gender, or race? We did not. You can request ranges, and then
ranges. Yep.
Sometimes you will have. So like, I have a 3-bedroom house. Well, now 4. We added a 4th one in the basement, but I had a 3-bedroom house at the time, and we have our bedroom, and we had a boy room and a girl room, and the boy room has the 3 boys, and the girl room had 2 boys. And in Illinois, they just have arbitrary, like, a kid needs 78 square feet, and then every additional kid needs like 23.5 square feet or some random crap like that. And so in my son's room, we have those IKEA Kura, those bunk beds, like slim little bunks. They're awesome, and we flip them upside down. And so I could put a 4th boy in the boy room, but it's, I don't know, it was like 8 square feet shy or some random number. So for us, I didn't choose, I only want girls. It was just, I only have room for girls. And then something that another question like this kind of goes with is, we were worried about the birth order thing.
Yeah.
We had some friends who adopted private adoption from Haiti, and one of their kids was older than their oldest kid. And they were like, I don't recommend that. It interrupts how they see themselves in the family. They don't feel like they're the oldest kid. Or I know you said your youngest also struggle with that. Like, well, I was the baby and I'm not the baby anymore. Although that's, I guess, more of what you might call a natural reaction. As you have kids, all of my kids were the baby at one point.
Yes,
and they weren't.
Exactly.
So what was your thinking? What was your thinking when you went into it? Like, did you have room for both? Did you only want to do boys because you were used to raising boys? You said you did any ethnicity type thing. How did you guys process birth order, and how did you come to putting down everything that you would be willing to take?
Yeah, we also had heard the recommendation about maintaining birth order. And yeah, our youngest bio son was the youngest for a really long time. And so, but regardless of age, a change like this, it was tough for our oldest too. I mean, it's a big change.
Yeah.
And I think that's true if you have another bio child. Like it kind of shifts everything and changes, where mom and dad's attention are going and things like that. So we did decide to stick with kids younger than our bio kids. And because of the rules about how long you can keep kids of different genders in the same bedroom, we decided to, that was kind of one of our determining factors of keeping the kids on our range younger, because if they needed to stay with us for longer and they kind of aged out of those rules, we didn't want to be in a position where then we didn't have space for them. So that's kind of why we kept it on the lower end, because when they're younger, they can be in the same room with a sibling of the opposite gender for longer. So that was really the determining factor for us, was the space that we had in our house, birth order of our bio kids, and then just wanting to be able to make sure that if we needed to care for them long term, that we were able to.
Yeah. And you can also, so like what you'll do when you get your license is you'll put on there are only so many things that you really get like hard and fast, because even the age range is kind of a suggestion. And we got calls from outside the range or outside the gender. Like I said, I got calls for boys, and I was like, I physically, legally cannot. I would help you, but I'm not allowed to. Your department said I can't. And I'm still that way. I'm like, they have this weird hard cap at 6. And I was like, I have so much room. I drive a 12 passenger. I don't care. I'll take all the kids you got. You keep telling me you're desperate. And they're like, no, we can't go above 6. And I'm like, but you can. But you could though. Like you could waive it. You could. And they're like, no, we can't waive this.
You
I'm
really
like, you waive a lot of stuff. You could waive it.
That's why you just have to do Safe Families, Greg, because you can, we don't have a 6 cap. So
that I'm until my oldest turns 18. And I told her, I was like, hey, when you turn 18, we're re-upping our license like the day after your birthday, just so you know, because you won't be a minor anymore. And it was funny. Liv asked me about that. She's like, what do you think? And I was like, oh, I think like the day after she turns 18. She's like, I thought the same thing. I'm like, all right, we're on the same page. Good. Like we're diving back in as soon as we are legally allowed to. But with the age and the gender, sometimes it's hard and fast. Like with me, I could only take girls. Oftentimes, if you have the space, you can leave it open. Or like Afton said, sometimes you want to future proof a little bit, because if you do get into foster care, you should plan on 2 to 3 years. It might not always be that long, but sometimes they go long. Or it might be permanent, it might be 18 years. So you want to plan for that. And the other thing is your license has a very small amount of information on it. And I think they keep it vague on purpose, because what will happen is they'll call you and they'll say, hey, we have a 4-year-old boy. His name is Jeff, and his mom got arrested for drug possession. Right. And that's all they give you. And so what they told us, and I'm sure they told you, was like, you need to have your parameters ready to go, because you're not going to have a ton of time to mull it over once they give you the phone call. They kind of need a yes or no, because they have a displaced kid in their office and they need to find a place to put him. So you don't really get to sleep on it. And so something that I think is, and they'll mention this in class, but something that's very important is like, you need to think like, do I want a kid above a certain age, maybe who has been sexually abused, and they'll sometimes act out that behavior, and that's going to be, do I want to deal with that? Maybe I don't want to deal with that. Or as I mentioned, if you have a medical special needs kid, they count as 2. And so like for us, I can't take a medical kid because I don't have 2 slots. I only have one. I've only got 1 slot. If you're worried about ethnicity, like if you're like, I don't feel equipped to, watch after a kid whose culture I don't understand, you're going to have to, they're not going to tell you that. You will have to infer that from the name if you can, because they usually won't come out and tell you. Because again, it's like, you're talking to a CPS agent who is probably standing there with the police, and they've just removed a kid from the house, and they have the most basic information. It's usually age, name, and why they're a basic description of why they're in the system. And so you need to kind of have your decision made before they call you.
Right.
And yeah, you can put stuff on your license, but it's not, yeah, they won't always listen, and they won't always, yeah, they'll call you anyway. Yeah, we talked about this, but this is a great reminder that you can get a foster license and you can kind of trial run it. You don't have to take on full foster kids. You can be a respite family for foster families.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch kids for a week if they need to leave state for an emergency or something like that. And then, if you have your license and you decide, you know what, I'm feeling great about this, I'm feeling inspired, I want to dive in. Well, then you've already got it taken care of, so you're good to go.
Yeah. I will say too, there are some group homes, and there's one in our area where they have kids who, have extreme trauma and can't be placed in traditional foster homes just because they won't be successful. But they are, in group homes, and they need mentors. They need people to spend time with them.
Yeah.
They need people to invest in them, and so that's a good opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's another way. That's a great suggestion. That, like, I know people are scared of the kind of permanency of it, and I get that. I understand that, like, you're taking on a 2-year commitment. This isn't something to take on lightly.
Right.
Even though I joke about it a lot, it's but yeah, there are a lot of ways to get involved and really make a difference without having to be a full-time foster family.
Yes.
And then you might find that you really get a lot of. It's very rewarding to help kids.
Absolutely.
I talk about kids a lot because I think of all the, not that there are not needy people that need things in the world, but kids to me are in a special place because they can't do anything about it. Like, every other case has agency in their life, and kids don't. And that really bothers me, that they're very stuck. I'm getting, I have to stop talking about that.
Yes. No, I get it. I totally get it.
So I want to bring this back up because we didn't fully talk about this. So we talked about the trauma informed parenting and whatnot. And the end of this question, I think, is kind of important here.
Yeah.
I have too many things clicked. There we go. This was a longer question, but how do you deal with behavioral and emotional challenges? And we did talk about that. But the end of this question here is, do you get help, or is it up to the foster parents to figure it out? You didn't just have to figure it out, right?
No. Yeah. So, you do have to do some, like, continuing education to keep your license, but also, if you're struggling and, you want to not be struggling, right? You don't want constant conflict in your home. Like, you're going to do everything you can to try to get some help. And so there are organizations that offer training classes, or DCFS has additional training classes, or wherever you're licensed through has that. And there's also support groups and people that you can talk to. So, it is, up to you to an extent to want to figure it out and to get the materials that you need, but there are lots of resources available. And I think counseling is really great too, getting a counselor for the kids and kind of working through that as a family. Those have all been things that have helped us.
The state pays for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, a lot of times they, like I said, they have those classes too. And typically we've never really had one that we've had to pay for any kind of extra training classes. Most of those kinds of resources are free for foster parents who want to, just improve their skills and being able to deal with difficult situations. And then, time's a big factor.
Yeah. And I just want to point out that you do, most of what you touched on, most of the services are free to foster families, just through the state. Like, if you work with your caseworker and you're like, hey, we're having serious behavioral issues, and you'll be seeing your caseworker often, especially if your kid does have like behavioral stuff or medical stuff. Like with ours, we did this easy case. So like I said in one of the videos, like, she literally a couple of months during COVID pulled up to our mailbox and yelled out, "Everything good in there? We good? You guys?" And we're like, we woke her up from nap, and then we brought her out to the front door so she could see if she was alive. And
like, give a wave.
Yeah, and like that was it. And and then she was like, "All right, cool, call me if you need anything," which was fine because our situation was very stable. But if you have a volatile situation, your caseworker is going to be in a lot more contact with you, and you will be able to tell them, like, look, we need to see some behavioral therapy, we need some occupational therapy, and they're going to provide you, because again, this is the state's kid. And I think that's something that is important to frame, not only for your own expectations about like your adoptive relationship, but also just if you have issues, that's their responsibility. It's legally their job to take care of that kid. And so if you need things, you want to tell your caseworker, and that's their job to get that for you. So if you need therapies or whatever, and therapy, I think a lot of people don't realize therapy is just as much about parents as it is about kids. Like you'll meet with a therapist yourself, and they will give you, not only will they work with your kid, but they'll give you the tools because they can't be there all the time. So that's a big thing with child therapy, is giving you tools to use. So yeah, you're not alone in foster care. The state is there, as limited as resources they have, and then there are also nonprofit organizations that are dying to help you out. And then there's a lot of private. There's a lot of private people. Like once you get involved with these support, they'll have a list of places that you can go. That there's a lot of private organizations that have a heart for foster care. Like over in St. Louis, the Magic House, which is a cool place. It's totally free, like for your whole family, not just your foster kid, like your entire family. Like, hell yeah, free tickets. Please come in here. We love that you're fostering. Come enjoy our exhibit. And there's a lot of places like that. They give you reduced fees, or they have special hours or whatever, because there's a lot of businesses out there that want to support you. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it is amazing.
All right, I got two more questions, unless I get any more from the chat. This last one is, what are some of the biggest obstacles facing foster children right now?
Oh yeah.
A lot.
I mean, I think lack of foster parents is a big one. So that's, sometimes how kids end up in residential, residential care, or like a group home type setting, just lack of foster parents.
Or they get left in their own home. I didn't know about that until that's crazy to me, that they're like in foster care, but they're living with their bio parents. That's nuts.
Oh yeah, I didn't know about that.
That they're extreme cases, but it's just because they don't have enough beds. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
That doesn't seem. No, you're good. That seems like a terrible idea.
It's extreme, but they don't have a choice
in the first place. So, I mean, I think that's a big obstacle. I think the other piece, in my opinion, is just people who will stick it out. So people who won't give up on them, and who will just work through these things with them. You're going to be dealing with a lot of emotions, and a lot of behaviors that can come with that. And so just coming from a place of people who want to understand, and again, not try to fix them, but to be there to walk through tough things with them. I think that's what's tough. And I think too, I don't know what it will be like when our kids get older, because right now, if you meet one of my kids, they'll tell you their whole life story. Like I was adopted. I wasn't always part of this family. I had a different family, and I did this. And like in 10 minutes, they'll give you the whole spiel. As they get older, I do wonder if they're going to have a little more complex feelings of maybe shame is not the right word, but almost like embarrassment that they're different than everybody around them, or perceived to be different than everybody around them. So I think those are some challenges to walk through in the future, is just kind of normalizing that some people come from, a different and more challenging, more difficult background.
Yeah. That's something Liv was want me to remember to say, is that I think that like you said, you want the long-term care, and you want to fully understand them and not have too many positive or negative expectations. Something that she brings up is, like I said a couple times, our daughter was an infant when we got her, and they told us about infant trauma, and I was like, come on, that's stupid.
Like,
infant
really?
trauma, that's really right. But she still has it. Like, she still has more separation anxiety than any of my kids. Like, every time we go to church, almost every week, we have to have a little powwow in the hallway, and we're like, we're coming. It's an hour. We're going to come back in an hour.
Yes.
Grown-ups always come back. We sing the Daniel Tiger song.
Perfect.
It's like she really freaks out about it, and she has, as far as fight or flight goes, she has no fight instinct at all. It is 100% flight every time. We used to have to get her into the house, like all the way into the house before we closed the garage door, because one time she injured herself running away from the garage door opener and tripped over the stairs, because that noise went on and she freaked out, and her entire body was like, don't even figure out what it is. Immediately run away. So there are still things that, even though, she was an infant, and I didn't think, oh, she doesn't have trauma. Yeah, it's there. And you still have to work with that stuff, even if it's what you might think of as light or whatever.
Absolutely. Totally
I'm sorry.
agree.
Were there any other obstacles that you're wanting with foster
Those
kids?
are, I'm sure I'm missing some, but I think that that's the biggest one. I would say too that a lot of the families that we serve in safe families are adults who were foster children themselves,
Hmm.
and so they're dealing with, you know, not wanting to repeat that cycle, or dealing with a lot of distrust because of what they experienced in the system. So I think that's a challenge too, is like trying to overcome, you know, all that they went through as adults too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's a lifelong impact, unfortunately. And that was something they told us in training, was a lot of folks, unfortunately, whose kids get taken are people who were taken. And it's like they just can't
Yes.
break out of the cycle. And that's very unfortunate.
Right. Mhm.
All right. So my last question here is this last one will be fun. We'll just get a little spicy here. What are some of the problems that you see in the foster system, and how would you fix them? Because when you start sitting around griping about the foster system, first of all, there's lots to gripe about. But as we've talked about a little bit, like some of it is so hard to come up with solutions for, because you can't go like fast tracking adoptions because you're basically kidnapping kids at that point. Like
Yes.
there's certain things about it that you're like, that's terrible, but I also don't know how I would fix it. So like what was one of the biggest things in foster care that you're like, this is super broken and it needs to be fixed, and what would you do, or what would you like to see?
Yeah. I just wish that there was something when it comes to the court proceedings to make it more reliable. So it
Hmm.
seems like for any number of reasons, you have prepared, you know, both like physically gathering, you know, documents and you know, information, and you prepared like mentally and emotionally to go through a court hearing, which is kind of a big deal. Like most people want to avoid going to court.
Yes.
You've prepared for all of this, and then for any number of reasons, it's like, oh, well, this happened, so court's continued. We'll see you in 3 months. So now you're 3 months further behind. It seems
Yeah.
like there should be some kind of a fix for that. You know, can we have some other people? Can we have like an understudy for some of these people where they can
Yeah.
step
Do we
in
have a
and
backup?
help finish this hearing so that we cannot like, drag this out so far? I think that was one of the things that would just frustrate me the most, is like, here we are ready to like see what's next, whatever that may be, and now it's like, just kidding. Well, you know, and you go all the way out there or whatever it is, and it's like, well, sorry, we can't do it today because of this, and so we'll see you in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of times they can't find representation for the parents. That was something that we were told often, was we don't have representation for them, and so we can't have court because they don't have legal, right? And
Right.
so that was a big issue that we ran into a lot. And so that's where the continuance comes in, because they deserve legal representation, but then
For
the
sure.
county doesn't provide it, and they're like, well, then we can't do anything, and so it gets
Yeah.
pushed off.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
they almost moved our adoption day ceremony like within, you know, 2 weeks. We were like 2 weeks out, and they were like, "Oh, we just realized there's a conflict of interest because of this." And I'm like, "No, you guys have to figure this out because we've told these kids on this day this is happening, and
yeah.
they have trust issues. So we need to be able to come through with this for them,
Right.
this kind of big deal for them. So like,
Yeah.
you guys got to figure this out." So it seemed like there were a lot of like weird technicalities.
Yeah. For me, it would be I don't feel that there's any kind, and this just requires extra bodies, but something that bothers me is that there really doesn't feel like a lot of accountability. Like your only real contact is your caseworker. And the thing that I agree with people, that's the scariest part, is that if you don't get along with your caseworker, or if something happens with your caseworker, you kind of live or die by them. And
Mhm.
I would never. I don't know that I've ever heard stories about a caseworker just like straight up lying about foster parents. I don't want to spread that. Like, I think that's dramatic. But I do hear people say like, stuff takes longer than it should, or we're just not we're not vibing, and so like the case doesn't really go the same way, or we don't get the support that we think we need, or whatever. And or requests that we have just kind of get lost or something like that. So I've heard some stories about that with caseworkers, and if you don't get along with them, you're just kind of screwed,
Yeah.
because the just like bad foster families are allowed to continue to exist because the state is so starved. It's the same way with caseworkers and agents and everybody that
Mhm.
works there. Like, they can't afford to be chastising people or chasing them off just because of a little bit of bad behavior, because they're having a hard enough time attracting people anyway. So they kind of have to put up with some bad actors sometimes, just like they have to put up with some bad foster families. So that's
a great point.
Yeah, I would love to see a little more accountability there. Are there any other thoughts that you had while we were talking? I'm gonna wrap this up pretty soon. Anything that you wanted to reiterate, or maybe a question that you saw or thought of, or like a frequently asked question that you run into?
Yeah, I think kind of back to one of your original points, Greg, that like people just think, oh, I could never do that, or like, oh, you're such a special person that you could do that. Like, no, I'm not. I'm just a mom who,
Right.
saw that there's a need for foster families and felt like, hey, I can step into this. And it's not perfect. It's messy. It's hard. But we can do hard things. And so I would just encourage people that if you're, on the fence about helping in any capacity, whether it be your traditional foster care through an organization like Safe Families, learn some more about it and just really consider if it's something that pulls you out of your comfort zone. It might still be really worth it, and you might be able to really contribute something in a meaningful way to a kid's life that could, impact them forever.
Yeah. I mean, change their whole life, and that's not an exaggeration. I mean, that's real.
No.
That's real stuff.
Yeah.
The one last update here, we are at 2876. So that is well over 10 times what we raised last year. And the ad money from the videos is going to Safe Families as well. So it'll be over 3,000 by the time the month is over. So that's very,
incredible.
Very
this we appreciate it so much. Yeah, I mean,
from last time. So, and maybe next year will be even bigger, and we'll just keep growing this thing. It'll be amazing.
And I know I mentioned that we're really like a frugal organization. So Greg, like this donation means a ton to us, and it goes a long way to help us actually help real families in our community who are struggling. So we can't thank you enough for the opportunity.
Yeah. And I mean, just really the thanks to the commenters and the people that engage with the videos. I mean, by watching and liking and they got a lot of watch time, and they raise like the ad money, and then there's tons of donations that came in. Like I'm completely floored with the support that I got this year out of this. And I'm really so thankful to the audience. If you are watching this in the future, the fundraiser will go through June 4th is when YouTube's going to cut it off, and then they'll bundle it all. And 100% of it goes to Safe Families. So they don't, it's kind of a cool thing. YouTube usually takes a big cut of like ad money or super chats or whatever. But when it comes to a fundraiser, it's 100%. It all goes to them. They don't keep a penny of it. So that's really cool. So if you're watching this in the future, you can, I will link the Safe Family website down below. So you can go and you can give to them, and you can check them out and learn what they're about. Afton, thank you so much for giving me your evening. I know you're off the clock, but you still gave me almost 2 hours to talk about this and give your experiences and talk about Safe Families. So I just cannot thank you enough for your time.
Yeah,
and I don't know, maybe we'll do this again next year, and we'll thank you all for participating in the chat. I really appreciate you guys submitting the questions and giving us something to talk about. So I will see you all next month for our regularly scheduled programming, and I'll see you for doing this fundraiser again next May. Thank you all so much. No, I don't want to leave the studio. I just want to end the stream.